Hello and welcome to the Integrated Rehab and Performance Podcast. My name is Dr. Nick Curtis and I'm running the show here at the Integrated Rehab and Performance Center. Today we have a golf podcast episode 30, I believe. We are with Ben Pellicani. He is a golf pro here in Nashville. Another interview podcast, a fantastic one, a lot of great nuggets in this episode. Ben has been in Nashville for 11 years, helping to coach. He coached at the college level around here at Lipscomb University, and now he is a high school coach at Lipscomb Academy. We go into some details about his coaching philosophy. We talk a lot about some of the things that he is seeing commonly in youth and adult golfers, how my side of the profession is involved in terms of creating mobility, creating strength stability, and then creating golf-like power and speed after we make these changes in my patients and clients. And then we talk a little bit about some of the ideas of using cueing in the golf swing, whether it's in my side of the realm where we are doing creating body awareness and then taking that and creating performance out of it, and then and his side where he needs to be able to get golfers to create the correct sequencing and the different ways in which he goes about doing that. And we talk a little bit about this idea of an outcome-based cue. Going from an internal to an external to an outcome-based cue. Very, very interesting kind of ideas that we discuss in that regard here. So stick around, learn a little bit more about Ben Pellicani and how he is helping Nashville golfers here to improve their swing, focusing on dialing it in first and then creating some speed on top of that to maximize performance. So without further ado, this is Ben Pellicani from Nashville. Ben, thank you for being here today, taking the time this morning to come on to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Just had Virgil on. We did the first kind of inaugural golf pro interview, so you get to be second. And just like Virgil before, you got a lot going on, a lot of accolades, a lot of history. Tennessee Teacher of the Year, Golf Digest, Best in State, and many, many more. What else can you tell us about your history in golf and then just teaching here in the state of Tennessee as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, played college golf. Got the opportunity to play at Bucknell University. Was never the number one player. Was always kind of the back end of the lineup type guy. Got to play, or thought I could play, professional golf. Got my butt whooped by some guys down in Florida. I think I donated some to some careers. And then went back up to Maryland. Was an assistant pro for a couple of years. I just couldn't do the work behind the desk. I'm so appreciative of all those assistant pros and what they do because they have a lot of long hours and a lot of times go underappreciated. But got into teaching. Got the opportunity to then go work for a guy named Mike Bender down in Florida. Ran his junior development program for 3.5 years. That was a great opportunity and experience. But I always had a passion and a love to be a college coach, and that's what brought me here to Nashville. I was the associate head coach at Lipscomb University, a small Division I school. Was part of their progress from 249 in the country. We got to play in the national championship one year, so I think we were ranked as good as 30 in the country one year, which was pretty neat to be a part of their progress. Got a young family, was teaching golf full time while I was balancing college coaching, and that's so I kind of stepped away from the college world and now just teach golf full time. I'm also the director of golf, which is a really fancy way of saying I'm the head of the middle school and high school at Lipscomb Academy, a K through 12 Christian school here in Nashville. And so yeah, got still kind of do the coaching thing a little bit at the high school level, and then obviously give private lessons out of Westhaven Golf Club, which gives me a great facility to do it. And yeah, it's kind of the quick story.
Nice. Yeah, a lot going on. The Westhaven, they let you take non-members on there for lessons as well, right?
Yeah, they're great. Not a lot of private clubs do, but we have a 4-bay facility, quality little short game area, putting area, and yeah, we're open to everybody. Cool. With the building to be able to hit into out, we're able to even handle some inclement weather, which is nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I have to ask, the transition from college coaching to high school coaching, what are some of the lessons you've learned there? How are things a little bit different? And what do you appreciate about coaching at that high school, middle school level?
Yeah, great question. So, it's interesting, even the transition from when I was coaching to now. I've been out for 5 years. So I was right before COVID. I stopped in June of 2019, and then obviously
Wow.
COVID hit in March of 2020. And so now we have NIL, transfer portal. In college golf, it's about to even go to a roster cap limit. So that'll add another seismic shift in the way college golf works. But I would say in a lot of it has to do with the school I'm at.
Yeah.
The number one question you get when coaching college golf is, how'd you play? Where are you? Where are you ranked? Are you making the postseason? Where do you stand within your conference? And then the next question is, tell me about your kid. Tell me, the character of your kid. How are they doing in class? Um, and even at a school like Lipscomb University, which is Christian based, it is still a performance driven world. You cannot be dead last in your conference and be considered a success. So
Yeah.
the main difference is, and then again, I get the luxury of being at Lipscomb Academy to do this. The very first question I get asked every year when I do my end of season review is, tell us about your spiritual formation piece. Tell us how your kids are doing in the classroom. Um, Tell me what your kids are doing outside of golf. How else are they plugging into the community? And oh, by the way, how did you guys play? And so that shift has been great for me. I have found a lot more joy in that. And obviously, I'm super competitive. Every time we tee it up, I want to win the golf match. Uh, I have a desire to build a program that will win state championships. But at Lipscomb Academy, our priority first and foremost is, what will our kids look like in 20 years? So kind of what I like to say is, I'll tell you how good our program is in 20 years when you hear how good of mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and community leaders they are. And I think so far we've done a pretty good job in our first 5 years there. And I have a lot of kids who are great people. Sometimes we play good golf. I have a bunch of kids off playing in college right now, which is
Awesome.
super special as well. But they're good people first, and I'm proud to call them my kids.
Yeah, very cool. I imagine that's quite rewarding to be able to combine those different worlds of yours, the golf, with being able to coach young kids and kind of help, you can say, show their path forward and just be a part of that, as well as the spiritual kind of growth as well. Kind of putting everything into one. So that is a unique position you get to be in, and I imagine it's quite rewarding, especially working with younger kids.
It is. I always say I coach to provide young people the opportunity to learn and grow through competitive environments to better leverage their platform to serve those around them. And I just think that a school like Lipscomb Academy allows me to do that. And not that I don't bring that into my everyday teaching on the lesson tee, but when you only spend 60 minutes with someone, occasionally a couple times a month, it's a little different than being able to be with them 4 days a week. And the amount of time we spend with these kids, and mostly the nature of golf, right? Like there's a lot of downtime in golf, so we get to we get to kind of live life with these kids a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost worth considering, if you're a parent, getting your children involved in golf, almost even just for that reason, right? If they're going to do anything, and they can get that sort of guidance, I think it almost encourages people to consider letting their kids explore golf in that way, kind of combining those two things. So, new perspective for me, but I like it a lot. I think that's very intriguing. This kind of goes into that a little bit. Your coaching philosophy, and you had mentioned a lot about, especially when you're coaching the high schoolers and the younger kids. But in general, how would you describe your swing coaching philosophy and just your overall philosophy and making the changes you would like to see in certain swings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, it probably speaks a little bit to my background. So I was a mechanical engineer major in college, which really was because I didn't want to read books and I don't like to write. So that led me to just solving a bunch of math problems. And I was okay at that. So I kind of took that kind of mechanical engineering mindset. I worked for a company called TrackMan way back in the day. And then my time with TrackMan allowed me to be around a lot of people. Henry Breton, who's the Canadian national team coach, Conrad Ray, the Stanford coach, Brian Manzella out of New Orleans, great golf instructor, great science mind in the golf world. And then you combine that with my time, I still call him my good friend, Mike Bender. In his philosophy, he helped me kind of be able to navigate and understand some of the things that I already knew and kind of organize it. And that works in my train of thought. I would say this. I think right now there are two camps in the golfing world. I think there are people, and I think we both want to get our players to the same place. I think it's really important to have our players know where the ball goes and how far can we push that down the course. Mm-hmm. You have some instructors who see speed first and kind of where it's going second. And then you have other people who, like myself, who see where it's going first and then see how much speed we can put on top of it. So I would say that my time as a player, my time as someone who enjoys looking at like the numbers piece of this, right? The data analytics side of this says that if I know where the ball's going, then I have a better opportunity to shoot a low score. And so when someone says, what do you believe in? I say, well, I believe in a predictable start line with a predictable curve that goes a predictable distance. That's what I believe in. And so I see golf through the lens of physics, always have. But I also am a kid who never took a lesson until he was 25. And I grew up on a golf course without a driving range. So when you add those things together, it's kind of a unique angle that I take to the game of golf, because I can talk science as much as probably anybody else. But at the same point, that's not how I learned. That's not how I grew up. And so I kind of lean towards what I did as a player. So it's kind of that old school, kind of dig it out of the dirt approach. And so, yes, I appreciate and have a lot of the cool stuff, right? The 3D, the TrackMan, the body sensors, and all of those things that we can leverage now in what science gives. But the amount of time that you kind of pull from maybe like the Harvey Penick Little Red Book philosophy of teaching. So that kind of balancing it out. Yes, I believe in knowing where the ball starts and how the ball curves, and I think physics tells that story. I think what we are a very fancy physics problem, and how we do that obviously is uniquely different to every person because they have different abilities, different limitations. But at the end of the day, it is still about putting force into a club, and that club's going to make contact with the ball. And what's important is understanding how that ball is going to come out. And if we can own those things, I think we can play high-level golf. So it's probably a long answer to say I care about where the ball starts and how the ball curves. Probably in a day and age where speed kind of is a lot more of the flashy Instagram world. I sometimes act like I'm out on the island sometimes, but usually the people that I attract, the players that do well under me, are the ones who ultimately say, I care where the ball's going, and then we show them how to shoot low scores doing that.
Yeah, it sounds almost more like playing golf. It's where you every hole you're playing to the hole, as opposed to playing the same game plan every time you tee it up, where it's just as far as you can get it, get as close to the green as you can. So you'd say you combat kind of this new idea of distance first, and some of the data that's coming out of that, but you would say you're more so find location first, speed, distance comes second. I would like to get you and Bryson DeChambeau in a room and let you guys talk about some things with your backgrounds there and sort of the things that you guys are drawing
Bryson,
from.
It's funny. Me too. I would love to talk golf.
Great. Let's make it happen.
But you know what? Bryson is actually, I think, the model that, not the model in the sense that that's how you should swing the golf club. I think the model of how kids should learn how to play golf. So if you look at Bryson, what did he do? He hit the ball really, really well, very, very consistently first. And then he went and created a lot of speed. And then he said, okay, I know I have to give up some of my, um, accuracy, some, not all, right? I actually had a lesson this morning where I worked with a guy to make him more accurate. We taught him how to more productively create speed. So understanding how to create speed can sometimes actually even help a player hit the ball
Yeah.
more predictably, more solid. Because if you try to create speed in the wrong way, you actually hit it worse. So, but Bryson's a really interesting case study because what he did is he went and figured out how to hit it really straight, and then he uh, figured out how to create a lot of speed, and then he said, okay, how do I marry these together? And that's where he is now. And I actually respect him a lot for the way he went about doing that, but I think people forget that he figured out how to hit straight first. Then he figured out how to hit it really fast. And then he said, okay, I know I have to give and take a little bit here. What am I willing to give up? And at what level do I say, nope, that's where I'm going to stop. This is how I can play high level golf. And so I actually think his journey is a really fascinating one and one that I think a lot of people can learn from.
Yeah, no doubt. People definitely pick up on the nuances and just how nitpicky and precise he has to be, and just how far he's taken things. But yeah, I think you make a great point of what comes first, and what revealed in his background is not necessarily the speed, distance, and everything that people look at him for now. When it comes to youth golfers first, younger golfers, what are the kind of common things that you're seeing that most of the time you're working on with your younger golfers? What is kind of that consistent thing that you always have to kind of nail down first?
Yeah, what a great question. So, junior golfers, I think, and I think of this even in terms, I got four little kids, and my oldest is 9, and so we're starting the question now of helping them play better golf. And so, up until this point, has always been the same thing. I just make sure their thumbs are down the club, their hands are touching together, and we give them a little bit of, we have a little saying that we use to kind of keep their golf swing somewhat in check, but. Um, at this point in golf, it's always been go get goldfish at at the snack bar and get a Sprite. And if you want to hit 10 balls and then you're done, that's great. It's just making sure the golf course is an environment that is, related to happy memories for them. And so that's where we've been to this part. But here soon, when she's 10, 11, 12, I'm going to start saying like, all right, I want her to know how to play golf. And so the things that you usually combat with when you think about that middle school age kid is most of the time they're not strong enough to produce speed in the proper way. So they're going to go figure out ways to create speed. And um, and I say that under the lens of the way they create speed is not wrong, but if they truly want to have predictable strike, predictable start line, and predictable curve, those ways of creating speed would challenge that philosophy. So a lot of what I'm working on is understanding about one, how to square a club face properly, and then two, helping them understand how to not do what I call the jump, rip, and flip. And I know there's a good buddy of mine out of Knoxville who does a lot with speed. He encourages his players to do the jump because he goes, well, that's going to maximize speed. And I said, you're 100% right. Zero argument. So that's going to maximize speed. And I know that some of these early studies say that, if you swing fast, that the kid who swings the fastest when he's 12 probably swings the fastest when he's 16, which probably swings at the fastest when he's 26. I've read those studies too. But I wonder, are we okay with ultimately not leveraging the predictable piece just for the speed piece? And so I want my kids to swing fast. I teach a young lady, she's 10. And if you ask her what the number one rule in my bay is, she would tell you it's to swing fast. But we swing fast within the system that I think provides them to create the most predictable strike, the most predictable curve, the most predictable start line. And so hopefully they create speed in what I would call the proper way, the way that would lend itself to that to that control piece. And so, yeah, I would say the thing I'm working on most is what I call the jump, rip, and flip. And so helping our kids understand that there's other avenues to create speed, that yes, they probably will not create as much speed as they could the other way in this current moment in time. That's probably right because they're not big enough and strong enough. But if that's where their brain goes to create speed, when they're 16 to 20 years old, I don't have to teach that out of them.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where I go with it. I also just look at this, and this is a really interesting time. I think in the professional golf landscape, if you think about it, there's just so much more money than there used to be. And we look at these young kids who have tremendous amount of speed. I'll use Will Zalatoris as an example. His action produces a lot of speed. His action produces a lot of stress on his body, so much so that he got hurt and had to get surgery. But but because of that, it allowed him to play well. It allowed him to create a lot of money and to get a lot of money because of that. Do I think he can be doing what he's doing when he's 36? I would be very surprised. It's just my thought. But then the question is, does he need to do it when he's 36? Because he's made so much money up until that point. So it's a really interesting world we're living in. You're seeing it with baseball players right now. It's all about velocity, but so is the rise of Tommy John surgery, and so is the rise of labrum tears, and so is the rise. And so, yes, it allows them to pitch at high levels. Yes, I think I heard recently, and I probably agree with this, you probably need 170 mile per hour ball speed now to be competitive on. So what is that? That's 112 to 114 club head speed before we can even have the conversation if you can play competitive golf. So if that's the case we're at, are we setting our kids up to have a lifelong of playing golf, or are they just their body's just gonna break down? I'm fortunate enough to teach some MLB guys, and I teach a couple pitchers, and they just go, look, if I pitched back in the 80s, I probably would have pitched 5 more years. But that's not what they ask of us anymore. We're asking high demands on our body, and I'm not always sure that's for the benefit of the player. But if you look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, you can also make the argument that maybe it is. So I don't know. It's an interesting balance point we're in the golf world right now.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, with those baseball players, we're at an interesting point where the question is, are they going to prioritize getting their contracts with these guys where they can hold on to them for longer and a bit more predictable, kind of like you were mentioning with the golf swing? Do we prioritize predictability, and apologize if you think that background noise here?
Oh no, you're good.
Public space. Or are they going to prioritize short-term success, being the best for a shorter amount of time, right? And that's going to be baseball and golf coming up here. Are we going to start seeing 5-10 year spurts of greatness, or are we going to go for what's been kind of historically the ideas of greatness, where you can do it over longer time frames? And yeah, the Tommy John, all that's coming out through baseball, there's going to be a switch here soon enough, and it looks like golf's heading in that same direction where that switch will happen. And it's going to come down to suppose people like you and myself, where we can help these golfers in what you're doing with these younger golfers, and trying not to necessarily prioritize that route, but instead creating consistency first, and then putting the speed on top of kind of a sound base. And then same thing in my world, where we're working on it's almost like that same sort of idea, where we need to have a solid base, right? That all comes from just having access to the right mobility. It's not flexibility, it's mobility, right? Do we have access to the range of motion we need to get into? And then can we put some strength and stability on top of that? And then can we create some power and some speed into that? And then the last phase is, can we do it in a golf way, right? Really translating it to that golf swing. So building it up that way, it's always the way it needs to be. People get a little bit impatient, right? They just want to create speed right away. And if we don't open up the right things beforehand, create some stability in that new range of motion that we've opened up, and then create the speed, if you jump right to speed, It's just going to be compensations on compensations, and then injury happens there. And you're not even producing that speed and power in the best way. You won't even get the most power and speed out of it. Um, so both from my end and your end, we can see how kind of where we're thinking in terms of that priority. And again, working with not necessarily whether it's kind of a club golfer who just wants to play their best for the longest amount of time. They tend to be okay with that. They understand. Let's make things not so susceptible to injury. An example that would be like hip mobility, that lead side hip. You see a lot of swing characteristics coming out of not having access to that range. People early extend. They'll do anything to stay out of that lead side hip, to really get into that hip and to really use that internal rotation of that hip. They'll do anything to stay out of it because they don't have it. So they're creating compensations to try to be fast. And again, it's not coming from that proper place. And so now the knee is taking on so much more torque because that hip isn't taking it, right? Or it runs out of range so fast that that hip starts taking torque, and then everything comes along for the ride, including that low back, including the knee, including that ankle. So a Band-Aid approach would be flare that lead foot, right? Just open it up. Because now we've created kind of artificial range there. But is that the best way to produce power? Absolutely not. And is it going to keep long-term forces out of that knee and into that ankle and that hip? No, not that either. So it's a short-term fix without addressing that long-term problem in terms of pain, in terms of performance, and then swing technical performance, right, on your end, where you're not getting the technical best swing out of them when you're doing things like that, unless it has another reason for it that you see fit to kind of influence a big flare on that lead side foot and ankle. So it'll be an interesting decade here to see what things start popping up, and if you see some more injuries besides the common classic low back pain. I have to ask, in your history, have you dealt with any major or minor injuries, setbacks there golfing?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I was fortunate enough to have a really good player in front of me who we were able to win our conference championship my senior year, and that actually was the start of some really bad low back pain for me. So lower right side for me, and probably started my understanding a little bit of just how, I always say people do things as teachers because we think of ourselves as players first, and then we have to go figure things out.
Yep.
Luckily for my students, that I wasn't a very good player, so I had to figure a lot of things out. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was again, like you said, a lack of mobility. It took me a while to figure out. I mean, this is gosh, almost 20 years ago now. And I remember it wasn't until I found one PT person who, at the time it was new. This shows you how old it is. But they said, we have this thing called ART, active release therapy, and we think it can help you. And we think your hip flexor is really, really tight, and that's why you're getting lower back pain. Is even though you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, your hips are so tight that even though you're stretching and you're trying to do all this work, your muscle can't even move because it's almost, and I know it's not the right word, but I use the word calcified, right? Like it's hardened to the point where it can't move. And so they said, we're gonna break it up. And I said, okay. And they said, it's gonna hurt a lot. And I said, cool. and knock on wood, that kind of what started the process of me never really having back pain for a while until I got a little bit older and I kind of stopped doing the things I needed to do. Like I said, a bunch of little kids. I wasn't doing the maintenance stuff, and it flared up probably 18 months ago. But again, kind of have the solution to the problem now, right? So you go in, guy goes, oh yeah, did you get broken up again? And I was like, well, that's because I haven't been doing my work, and I kind of knew it. And so yeah, I'm a big believer in really understanding. It's still one of the things that fascinates me about the human body is that the fact that we're the only animal that has alternating mobile and stable joints. And it's a fascinating thing to me. And you would probably be able to speak way more into this, but my very, very layman way of understanding is a joint is something that moves, and a stable joint is it's supposed to only move in one direction. So mobile joints are supposed to move, have complete degrees of freedom, and stable joints only maybe a singular plain degree of freedom. And then a lot of times, a lot of people's problems, and you can maybe speak to this, is that our mobile joints aren't mobile, therefore our stable joints take on mobility, and that's where the injury happens. I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that in better terms than I
Sure.
can.
Yeah, that tends to be an easy way to understand it. But yeah, that's a common philosophy that tends to hold water. That's for sure. When especially with the hip, it's supposed to be a mobile joint. When that thing gets locked up, that low back lumbar spine is supposed to be a kind of a stable section of the spine, a more stable. We start asking it to do a lot of transverse plane motion, a lot of rotation, and it's of course it can do three dimensions. Every joint can, right? But it's specifically more in line to do one, right? So same thing with the knee flexion extension, low back flexion extension. There's some room for other things in there, of course, but yeah, it's more designed for just one plane, as you had mentioned. So yeah, well said. Yeah, when the mobile joints start to get a little bit locked up, we start putting a lot of extra pressure on those stable joints to take over some mobility tasks that we're asking from the body.
Yeah, and that really affects my world from a golf instruction standpoint. Obviously, we have we all have our own philosophies on how the golf swing works, but I'm a big believer in what's called a center pivot or a turn, in which you don't see a lot of lateral movement off the golf ball. Is lateral movement bad? No, but we need lateral movement going forward, and I think having to make up additional add challenges in sequencing of how, now the buzz term is how we use the ground. But, if you think about any athletic motion, a pitcher going down a pitcher's mound, everyone has a lateral, vertical, and a rotational move. That's how we move towards targets. And so if we are having to go through large sections in a short amount of time, I think it's harder. So I believe a lot in centered pivots. And when you have centered pivots and you believe in what I call depth, how far your hands move behind you, you need a lot of movement in those hips. I ask my players a lot to create a lot of turn in those hips, to create some hand pass depth. And again, that's how far your hands move behind you, because I believe that's the easiest way to get the club, quote unquote, on plane or to be more efficient, right? I'm a big physics guy. And so that movement through the hip, and what I see a lot with players is when they go to try to make those moves, and we have drills that we can do, their first comment is like, "Whoa, I'm tight," right? Like, "Oh, that's tight." And what I find is a lot of times they're not willing to do something because it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the great question is it just uncomfortable and so they didn't do it, or is it uncomfortable because they're going to get hurt doing it?
Yeah.
Right? Which is a really balancing act in my world. And that's where what you guys do is, comes into play, because is it just that's a little tight because you've never done it? Okay, that's fine. I call that a me problem, right? It's a motor learning problem. Or is it you're just not capable of doing it? And when I asked you to do it, your body said no. And that becomes more of a you problem, right? Like that's where my expertise ends, and people like you step in.
Yeah, that's something that I really highlight in my treatment and care, our treatment plans, is taking that step. So we do things like called table tests, where I can assess your mobility at every single joint individually, but we always record global movement patterns beforehand. So I want to see how your whole body goes about creating rotation, right? We ask your brain to create rotation. What does it choose to do, and how well does it do it? So how far do you get? How much mobility do you have? And how does your body choose to do it? We can compare those videos later down the road, but we also have to know more about the individual joints, right? So we'll get you on the table and we'll look at hip mobility, internal rotation, external rotation, flexion, things like that. See where you're at. We can make changes to those table tests. There's things we can do. We can use our hands, soft tissue stuff like you kind of experienced. We can do some chiropractic adjusting on the extremities, even help free up some space, create things moving again better there. And then I always go into kind of corrective exercises where they're very precise. We call them like bend exercises, because they're very specific to what you have going on and what we're trying to achieve, whether it's a change in the orientation of the pelvis, which affects hip mobility as well. If we're just going to focus on hips here, and then retest those table tests and see how much better we've gotten in our mobility. But we always have to take that to the next step, get them back on their feet, get them building strength, like I'd mentioned earlier, and stability around that so that they can, again, start building them back up towards that golf swing so they can actually feel all this mobility that they've created and learn how to use it in the swing. Because that's the big difference is I can get anyone to start moving a little bit better in a specific joint over a little bit of time, but can they step up onto that range and go into their backswing and do the things you're asking them to do and feel good, right? Not being limited because of how they feel, even if they have access to range of motion. We need to make sure that they're able to translate that standing up, get a feel for it on the gym floor and the clinic floor so that it's an easy translation by the time they get up to you, where they're not thinking about how their hips feeling and their knee is feeling and how their low back's feeling when they're turning, and instead just focusing on what you're telling them to do, where their hands need to be, right? External cues. The more we have people thinking internally when they're trying to do a complex task like golf, the worse it's going to be, right? We always try to, and at some point you have to go there, but we always try to go and move things in towards external cueing so that you're not telling them to rotate their hips as much as they can, but instead you're telling them reach for this, golf club back here, reach for your bag, reach for your head club cover, right? Just reach. And then kind of like I was mentioning earlier with those global movement tests, whatever we're doing, how does the body choose to do it? If you open up space for them and say, okay, complete this external task, reach for this, rotate, do whatever, it will start improving, right? We can see that change. Same thing on the golf course is we don't want them thinking about their hip. We do not want them thinking about their low back. We don't want them thinking too much about anything internally. We have to, especially depending on where the golfer's starting in your world. Surely you have to get them thinking about individual, right? Just trying to get things started at some point. But the quickest you can get them transition to external cueing, where it's more environmental. Think of it like if you're doing a bench press, you're not telling them to contract your pecs or to bring your arms closer together. You're thinking punch the ceiling, and that always improves performance. And the body organizes itself way better that way. Power goes up, strength goes up, motor control goes up when you create external cues. So the more that we can take this bad sensation, or at least translate it on the gym floor, the clinic floor, so that by the time they get to you, they're comfortable in it. That's always how we get those best results, right? So kind of like you were mentioning, where are they doing it because it just feels bad, or is it because they actually don't have range and they might get injured? We just make sure that we free up that space and we take away any sort of consideration from the golfer that this is a new experience for them, and how that might be putting the governor on things and limiting their ability to do what you're asking them to do. So it's an interesting point how those two things kind of relate and come together. Did you experience anything like that when your back started acting up? Did you start thinking more about what your hips were doing when they told you how tight your hips were? Because I get golfers, we'll come in, we'll do some table tests, they'll see it, I'll explain it, gotta tell them, show them this is what's up, and then they go onto that range and they're like, yeah, you're right, my hips are tight, right? They'll feel it, and it's like, okay, we can change that, but I don't want you feeling your hips when you're swinging, forever. And then we get moving, and they'll come back and they'll say, wow, my hips feel way better, right? And that's great. And then it's time to get them out of that headspace. Did you notice things like when your low back was bothering you that you couldn't stop thinking about how tight your hips were or what your low back was doing in the swing?
Yeah, that's interesting. That was, I feel old now, but that was like 15 years ago.
Gotcha.
So I was 25 and probably didn't think much anyway.
Of course, yeah.
But I would say this, right? Like when you think about changing, I always think about the four ways you can make changes in the golf swing, right? You can have feedback tools, you can have training aids that assist or resist, you can do gym-like exercises. So anything that involves not hitting a golf ball, could be everything from a rehearsal swing to the stuff that you guys do, to what I call the old school stuff, right? Which is like, hey, you're falling back, we'll go put you on a downslope and say figure it out. I think ultimately, I remember talking to some of my tour players about this. I think ultimately, and I loved how you said like getting more external. I think the best swing thoughts are ones that directly relate to a ball flight. And so there's this like late onions of or these layers like an onion deep of what that word means. So if you think, I don't know, punch draw, right? Punch draw. But punch draw might have had something to do with how the shaft's leaning, might talk about how the body's pivoting, might talk about there
Mm-hmm.
might be a sequencing piece that's
Oh
been
yeah.
developed into that. So eventually I think you're right. I would even go a step further. It's not just internal, external, it's internal, external to a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best swing thoughts are uh, ones where the buzz term, right? If you want to say that, I think all great players have swing thoughts. It's these little buzzwords that they have in their head. I think when those equate to actual shot patterns out on the golf course, and
Yep.
it doesn't even have to be the shot that's being hit. Um, the joke around here is that I hit a lot of draws. Sometimes those draws become aggressive draws, and
Sure.
some might call them hook.
Right.
Um, but someone goes, well, what do you think about on the golf course? I said, well, I think about hitting high cut. They go, you never hit a high cut. I said, I know. I never hit a high cut. They said, so what's your swing thought going into that shot? I said, hit a high cut. And they go, but no, I said, no. So for me, I hold on to the angle too long. I drag the handle. I hang back and spin my body. And I said, to hit a high cut, I have to release the club more. I have to get more forward and I have to rotate more through the golf ball. I said, it's
Mm-hmm.
the flip opposite of what I do. So if someone asks, what are you trying to do? I said, hit a high cut. They go, but you hit low draws. I said, but that's not the point. That term has all these other things deep inside of it,
Yep.
and those are learned through the drills I do, the what I the rehearsals I make, and you're 100% right. Now, some of that is body limiting, right? And if I truly want to hit a high cut, I probably would need to spend a lot of time with you because my hips don't move well enough to actually probably allow me to hit a high cut,
Right.
right? And so there's this balance. Not that I get to play a lot of golf these days, but if I was going to go play golf for like a week straight, I would probably have to in the back of my mind go, I don't know how long I can try to hit high cuts because eventually my body's going to say, snap, you're going
Yep.
to have to stop doing that now.
Right.
And so there's that balancing act as a golf instructor that we have between what someone's physically able to do, um, and then again, because I see it through the lens of physics, I look through it as, okay, if we don't do that, what does that mean? Are we losing ability to create speed? Are we losing ability to be efficient? Are we losing what what in the big math problem, right? Are we having to do now to compensate, to balance, or what do we lose because of we lost the ability to do that? And so with my junior golfers, for the most part, they tend to have the full array at their disposal.
Right.
But this afternoon I'm going to teach a female college player, and I'm going to teach a 65-year-old man, and the physics problem hasn't changed. What I have at my disposal has,
Right.
and so how we balance all of that out, and ultimately, I know it's an ugly word now, but I even think in your world, there's got to be a method to the madness, right? There has to be priorities, and um, I know people say you shouldn't have a method to do things, but there's got to be a priority 1, 2, and 3, and that is, that's the truth. It's just like in your world, you've kind of been preaching from the start of this, right? Like, I got to get you mobile first, then I got to get you strong, stable and strong around that, and then we can so there's
Yep.
there's a priority list there, and um, I know that sometimes doesn't always make for great Instagram stories, but
Sure. That's right.
I was talking to someone about that today. I said, that's also the really interesting stage we are in golf instruction. I gotta believe it in your industry as well is what makes for a good video, what makes for a good clip, isn't always what's best for the player. And so, where does the teacher fall in that, or in your case, the healthcare professional? Where do you fall in that pecking order? What is our job? What's our responsibility? And I think it's a really interesting place we're at because even though we have a lot of new science and a lot of new knowledge, how does that translate into helping our players when, you know, sometimes some of this older stuff works for a reason. It might need to be tweaked a little bit, but man, some of that's really, really good.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was talking with a colleague the other day actually as well about uh, Instagram and how you're putting out certain concepts and the the stuff that me and him would agree is more useful doesn't necessarily translate, and the quicker, flashier things tend to translate a little bit better. But when you're really going about making change, truly in the clinic and stuff like that, there's a bottom line, and you got to do simple things really well. And one of those is just being able to move, to have access to that range, and then we can decide what we're going to do on top of that. When it comes to older golfers, like you had mentioned, we talked about the youth, the younger golfers. What are some things that you're noticing with the club golfers around here that want to win a member, or they want to just improve? Maybe they change the flight that they're playing in, things like that. What are the things that you tend to notice that are trending around here in Nashville with maybe 30, 40-year-old golfers that you're working on mostly with them to start? Is there anything that you're noticing, any sort of trends like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's concept confusion, and I think it is because of social media.
Yeah.
I think that there's access now to so many different ways, and I kind of use this analogy is if I was um, a lead car designer for a Ford pickup truck, or if I was a lead car designer for a Ferrari sports car, they're both excellent at what they do, but they're solving different problems. And I think that's the really hard part right now with Instagram and social media and YouTube is you don't know what problem was being solved. And so the concept confusion I think comes into that, let alone, I even think in the golf instructor space we can't agree. Like I, I believe, I think it should matter where the ball goes first. Then I think we should create a lot of speed. I learn stuff all the time from the speed guys on how to grade speed. I love listening to them talk and how they teach because there are times where I leverage that information. Just like the Ford pickup designer could probably go listen to a Ferrari guy build a car and go, hey, there's something there that we can leverage. But you know what we do? We pull 5,000-ton trailers or 5,000-pound trailers, and we uh we have to be reliable, and we have to worry about gas mileage, and like we have to worry about these things. And the Ferrari goes, I don't have to worry about those things. I care about how fast I go 0 to 60. And so there's the give and take on those two sides, and so you get a population now in their 30s and 40s who, uh, rightfully so. I mean, I look at Instagram too. Uh, Obviously, I can see it from a different lens because of the knowledge set that I come in with. And my first thought is sometimes that's great information, but I that's not going to help people because they don't understand the seven other things that go behind that gets them to there. And so a lot of our 30 to 40-year-olds, it's about helping them understand. And that's kind of, you talked about at the beginning, what do you kind of believe in as a teacher? I'm a big believer in knowing why. It's one of the things that we spend the most time on with our players is if you can own the why, then you will believe probably what I believe. And if that's the case, then we're going to be good in this journey. If you ultimately believe in something different than I believe, I will tell you what instructor here in Nashville believes what you just said. That's okay. That's okay that I'm not the right person for everybody. Just like if I was the lead designer for Ford pickup trucks, I don't think Ferrari should have hired me either. Because now sometimes it's worth hearing the other side because maybe there's something to be learned there. But I think concept confusion is really, really prevalent right now. I think I'm just as much as the problem as I am the answer. And it used to be that the number one reason someone came to me was referral. And now I would say the number one reason is because someone sees me on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it is the number one reason that I ask every new student, how did you find me? And most of the time it's, well, I follow you on Instagram and I like the things you say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know about you. Maybe that's true in your world a little bit as well, but I think probably everyone has too many desk jobs and sit and rides in cars too much in your world. But
Certainly. Yep.
but yeah, I think concept confusion is prevalent and rampant, and probably what I do the most of is hopefully help them have clarity and ultimately own what they do. Right, their golf swing, it's not mine. I just want them to be the best versions of themselves, and obviously I'm convicted in my beliefs, but that's because I can usually say, here's the science and the reason why I believe this is true. Not saying you can't do it another way, but here's the reason why I think this way probably makes the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So with those club golfers, maybe the main issue is they want one thing. They came in for one thing, and you're like, hey, we need to break down your swing and find out technically what's the best way to get you consistent. Would you say most guys are coming in and they're like, we want speed? Is that kind of the thing you're combating?
Yeah, I probably don't get. I do get a hand. I get a couple people. Obviously I don't tout that a lot. So
That's right.
I say that. I mean, my guys still swing it fast. I think people think we hit proof
No
balls
doubt.
around here, but
Of course.
I mean, if I was a long drive guy, I wouldn't probably come see me.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think some of it's speed. I think actually the real thing that I think's gotten really, really muddled is sequencing. I think sequencing has really been muddled through and again, probably a little bit because if the only thing you wanted was speed as generation one, um, I would agree that their sequencing might look a little different than my sequencing. Um, but I think sequencing is probably the biggest thing that I think people are confused on. Some of it's body limitations, right? They want to do one thing and they can't because they're not 20 anymore.
Right.
And then some of it's just concept. They just go, whoa, but I saw so and so do this. I said, sure, you can do that, but you also have to do X, Y, and Z, and that's what you came in with. And you're telling me that doesn't shoot a low score. There is this also interesting thing that falls is what is our job as a golf instructor, right? Is our job to raise a player's ceiling? Is our job to get someone to play at their ceiling? And I think that has a lot to do with what I would call the mechanics and skill acquisition. And so I think mechanics are your ceiling. I think depending on what your mechanics are, maybe a little bit in your world would talk about range of motion, right? Like mobility is mobility. That's your ceiling. Yes, we can do things to change it, but at some point you hit your ceiling of mobility.
Right.
And then ultimately, how do you apply that mobility in your world? And then in my world, it would be your ability to apply those mechanics in varying situations. Right? I call that skill. And so that's the other, I think, thing that makes the social media world kind of interesting. I was talking to a sports performance coach just the other day about this, is about how we view ourselves as golfers. I think play a role into this too, and it probably plays a little role in your world, because people can see their swing. I mean, I never saw my golf swing until age 25. I just didn't. Maybe because I just didn't take a lesson, but you'd have to get the VHS camcorder out, and I just wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
So, some of these kids, some of these adults even care way more about how their golf swing looks than the functionality of it, right? That in your world might be how their body looks versus if it's actually a functional moving body.
Right.
And then there's other people who care only about score to the point they're not willing to take the time that we call it periodization, right? In my world, but they don't take the periodization period of saying I have to fix my mechanics to allow for a higher end, and so they just go, well, I need my ceiling to be raised and I need to play at the ceiling all at the same time, and the answer is that's probably not going to happen. That's not what the Olympic sprinter does, right? So why do we expect you to be able to do that? And then we talk about, we said we worked in college. College was that interesting, unique time of how do I move a player's ceiling while also getting them to compete at a high level? Man, that was I would encourage every golf instructor to have to go live that life, because it's a really interesting life to work through with these kids, of this process of moving a ceiling while also playing near your ceiling in that tug of war that we play in, from a golf side. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that answered your question at all, but
Yeah. Yeah. That yeah, with periodization makes a lot of sense to me, and kind of my world where I'm coming from, with strength conditioning background and everything like that. So yeah, it's almost like, if you want to improve your potential, you have to sacrifice maybe in the meantime, what you're shooting, um, or what your range sessions are looking like, and maybe you're leaving those feeling not quite as good as you could if you just went back to the things you were doing before you started working on some other mechanical parts. So yeah, there's this little lull that you have to go through in order to come out the other side. So I imagine
yeah,
that is
that's really hard in the social media world right now,
absolutely,
to live through that lull.
yeah. I can imagine, and there's always something there to distract you and to try, and without giving it the full time that whatever you're working on previously needs to see that change, because there's always information coming at these golfers about what's going to fix them and make them perform better. So it's an interesting that both of us have to fight, but we're fighting it. I have a few interesting questions for you here before we finish up. I'm curious, golf hero growing up. Is there one guy that really kept you going?
Well, I was a big Bobby Jones guy. I thought he was fascinating. I just thought, the balance of his academic and knowledge,
Mm,
skill based, and then also high level golf. Um,
yeah,
I Bobby Jones is always fascinating to me. I just love reading stories about him, and
mm,
so yeah, I was a Bobby Jones guy.
I see. Yeah. Um, Around here in Nashville, or even at Westhaven, is there a single hole that you've identified as one of the hardest golf holes for you to play here? Let's start at your course there. Is there one hole on that course that you'd identify
Yeah,
as
that one's
essential?
easy. I don't have to think much about that. Yeah, I don't because of my fault in my golf swing. I know what my fault is. Again, I like to hang on the handle, drag it,
Yeah.
spin back, and fall back. I don't love elevated tees that are above the skyline, so above the treetop line. So we have a
Interesting.
hole here that because I like to pick out targets above me. That's how I externally
Wow. Yeah.
equate to better golf swings. And so courses in holes like that, the 10th hole here at West Haven, the number one hole at Troubadour, holes that have elevated high above tee boxes, above the treetop
I
line,
see. Yeah.
is not my favorite because of how I like to see.
Interesting.
Whereas the opposite of that, is now the 10th hole at Richland. There's a few holes that might go uphill. I like those holes.
I see.
I can resonate well with those holes. So yeah, it's holes in which I have to have excessively go downhill. I'm not a huge fan of. So
So interesting. Yeah.
I, I've learned to manage and navigate. And now that I know where that fault comes from, it's more of a, hey, I'm gonna play that hole to just make par, and at worst maybe make a bogey every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I just don't let that hole kill me anymore. I just say I'm okay making my four and moving on, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Fair enough. Very interesting. That's that. You had mentioned we talk about internal, external, and then you had said you translate it to the actual shot. That's that like third level. I'd almost maybe call it like outcome based cueing. So it's like internal cueing. What am I feeling on the hip? External being reach for an object, or reach for the sky or whatever, and then or like swinging through the shot, saying like drop it in the bucket. It's like another term of like external cue. And then outcome based, I think, is a good way of putting that third one, where you're saying, I try to hit a little high cut. Um, so that's in your body will in a way, the motor control, it'll perform that task, right? You don't have to think about every single individual part. You'd think outcome-based cueing is your kind of third step that you had mentioned there. And so when you're getting on these certain holes, you lose some of that ability to do that outcome-based cue, and you have to bring it a little bit back in, and it gives you trouble. So interesting. That was a really interesting answer. I have to ask, is there a golf trip that you've been on that has been your favorite place, location? I know that you and the team went across the pond there. You weren't playing in that trip, but would you maybe identify that as one of the most rewarding golf trips you've been on?
Well, from a rewarding side, absolutely. Yeah, for those who might not know, at Lipscomb Academy, we took our high school golf team over to do a mission trip in Scotland, in the East Lothian, just outside of Edinburgh area. And our kids did an amazing job. I did get to play 2 9 holes there, so I wasn't completely shut out. But no, I've been fortunate enough. I've made a lot of great trips over the years, playing golf, and I'm a golf history guy, so I like going to places that have history. I'm fortunate enough now to teach a handful of people that give me access to maybe some courses I didn't have a few years ago. So I like to leverage them on making some trips. But from a pure just like fulfillment standpoint, yeah, that the Scotland trip with our high school team right now is unmatched. I think the only way that gets changed is if all my girls grow up playing golf, and I get to go take a trip with them. But no, it was super special to go over there and again live life with my kids that I brought over there, my players, and then also live life with the East Lothian community. They were amazing to us, and hopefully we brought some value to them.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Hopefully more of that type of stuff happening in the future in the golf community, especially around here in Nashville. Very cool. Last question here, general question, must-dos for anyone coming to Nashville. What is on your friends, relatives that are asking you, hey, we're coming to Nashville, what do we, as a tourist, what do we do? What are you telling them to go?
Yeah, I mean, our food is so good, right? Like it's I know people say other places, but our food is so good, and so probably not the right thing to say, but I mean it should be centered around what meals you're having. I think first and foremost, figure out your food situation,
Sure.
and then figure out what else you're going to do. But yeah, we love Nashville. We've been here for almost 11 years now, and no, yeah, no, we have been here 11 years. Oh gosh, getting old. Been here over 11 years now, and we love it here. The people are great. It's really what makes Nashville more than anything else is the people here, and and the food's unreal, and you can really go wherever you want with that. You can go everything from your biscuits and chicken over at Loveless to Hattie B's and some Nashville chicken, or some barbecue at Martin's, right? So
very good.
You can go any direction you want with that. But yeah, the food around here is unreal.
Very nice. All righty, good answer. Well, I think that'll be it for today. It's been great talking to you. It's some great nuggets in there. I learned a lot. I really do appreciate you coming on. We'll do this again sometime. I'd like to do some podcasts out on the course, even where we just attach some mics, have a video on, and play a couple holes and chat about golf.
Give me a reason to go on the golf course. I need to go play more.
Yeah, we're gonna make it happen. We'll figure it out. Get the schedule figured out. But I just want to say thanks again for taking the time this morning, figuring things out, and hopping on with me.
Absolutely. Have a great one.
Well, thank you too, Ben.